Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. It's review time today and I'm going to be taking a look at Sea of Souls, the new dark fantasy by Scrimgeour. So I'll be honest here and say that I didn't really know what to expect from Sea of Souls. It sounded like an interesting story, but it also promised to be something a little bit new and a little bit different for me. It was also my first experience of Scrimgeour's work, and you never quite know what you're going to get from a new author and whether the writing style is going to suit your tastes. The book itself is steeped in Scottish folklore, with selkies taking centre stage, and that's something that really sets it apart from pretty much anything that I've read before. So I'll start with the writing itself because that's a nice easy place to build from. There's a short prologue to open the book which gives you an introduction to the selkies and the kind of darkness that surrounds them. It gives you a bit of the folklore, a bit of the in-world legend about what they are and what they do. And the opening line told me straight away that this could be a good book for me. It's difficult to put a lot across about the writing style and the tone of the book from just a single sentence of 12 words, but this opening said a lot to me, and the rest of the prologue followed on wonderfully from that. Dark be the waters, and darker still the creatures that lurk within. Now, I don't personally feel like the rest of the book was as dark as the prologue, although there are individual scenes that do match it quite well, and the writing overall has that perfect blend of movement and intensity within those darker moments. There's a pronunciation guide at the front of the book which will be useful for anyone who's unsure of how to wrap their tongue around some of the character and place names, and I'll be honest and say that there were a couple of those, when they did come up in the book, that were the only real sticking points for me, the only real bits that tripped me up momentarily before I got my head around those pronunciations in that first instance. The rest of the book was nice and free-flowing, and at just a touch under 350 pages, it also makes it quite a quick read. What really stood out for me here though was the world building. For me it was a perfect combination of fantasy and folklore. I never felt that I was reading a historical fantasy. Instead, we've got a secondary world that the author has created, and then there are elements within that world borrowed from Scottish folklore, and I like the way that allows the author to remove the shackles of what may be possible and to make these creatures seem real. The selkies, as I say, are the stars of the show. In water they take the form of seals, but on land they can shed their pelts and appear as humans. Humans hunt selkies for those pelts, and I like that you see all of the ramifications of that. And it's not just the retaliation aspect of it. As selkie raiders attack human settlements and ships, you also get to see a deeper, more personal side of it from the selkies themselves. I really liked this aspect and how it drove certain points of the story, although I won't obviously go into any of that for spoiler purposes. I love the way that everything tied together though, with the selkies and kelpies, and then you've got these mysterious Gunnar, and it made for some really interesting world building that I thought had that perfect balance of fantastical and believable. Everything seemed to fit nicely. There was nothing that was too far-fetched for the world that we have here. The characters were likeable and well written. The main two that we have are Isla Blackwood, who is a young human woman who's been away from home for the past 7 years, on a ship, searching the seas and searching within herself for a place to belong. And then you have Ava, who is an exiled selkie searching for a lost pelt. And although these two should be mortal enemies, circumstance forces them to work together, and there's a constant theme of distrust, most notably among the people around both Isla and Ava. I really liked that the range of characters we have gives you a number of different perspectives on the world, and especially in the way that the two groups, humans and selkies, see each other and how that influences their actions. That distrust that you have between certain characters leads to various opportunities for betrayal, and I like the way that this was handled throughout the book. The story itself flowed quite nicely. I thought it was nicely paced with build-up and then action, and then you get a bit of breathing space before the intensity hits again. There were some nice little twists and turns that I thought worked really well for the overall scope of the story. If you look closely enough, you can see the various subtle markers that are dropped throughout the story, and so when the twists come, even if you're expecting them, they do make sense and they work to expand a character's story arc rather than just being there for the overall shock factor. Along with that, there were a couple of things that I didn't really get at the time, because I felt that by the end of the book everything seemed to be wrapped up quite nicely, and again they all did kind of make sense, and I liked the way that happened. Overall, that led to a really enjoyable reading experience for me, and I definitely recommend Sea of Souls for anyone looking for maybe a slightly darker fantasy that gives something just a little bit different. And this one was an easy 5-star rating from me. So before I get into my weighted ratings, because some people have specifically asked me this question, yes, there is a little bit of romance in the story, but only a little bit. I don't think it's something that was a really important part or a really big part of the overall plot, at least in this initial volume of the Sea of Souls saga. So for those weighted ratings then, because I had such a good time with this, it was really fun, fast flowing, really interesting throughout, great world building. It ticks a lot of the boxes that I look for in a fantasy, and for the enjoyment factor I ended up going for 18 out of 20 because I just really enjoyed my time reading it. The world building I've also set at 18 because I loved the folklore elements of this. I loved the selkies and all of the little intricacies that you learnt in there. It wasn't just a case of here's a creature from folklore. There was a lot that came with that. There's a whole society that's been built. There's also the idea that you will see a lot more of that in future books in this series, so I'm quite looking forward to that. The characters I gave 17 out of 20. As I say, I really enjoyed the characters overall. I think they all worked together. There were no characters that I felt really fell flat, so that's obviously a good thing. Overall, there are some that I didn't like as much, but that was for personal preference rather than the way that they were written. And then for the plot, I also gave 17 out of 20. I liked the story. There were some nice little smaller elements to it. I like, as I say, how there were little markers throughout the story that started to build, and you could start piecing together the surprise, I suppose, the twist that you have at the end of the book, as well as some of the smaller twists throughout as well. I think it was a really good job that was done. It didn't give too much away too soon, and it was a really nice story to follow. The writing style is next, and as I say, it was really accessible, really free-flowing. I like how the author didn't shy away from using words that might be unfamiliar to people with, predominantly it was place names and character names, but as I said, there was the pronunciation guide at the front of the book to help with that as well, and they weren't too intrusive. There weren't too many of them, certainly not that came up quite a lot. Probably the key one is the selkie main character, Ava. The spelling of that is Eimhir, which a lot of people wouldn't look at as Ava. I think it's maybe Avir to follow the pronunciation guide fully. But as I say, that was the only one really. None of the others were really there very often to trip you up as you were reading. So 8 out of 10 for writing style because it's one that just really worked well for me. The pacing as well, as I said, it was really nicely balanced. It was leaning towards the quicker pace, I think, but that's what I like in a book anyway. So I went for 4 out of 5 on that one. And then for my discretionary section at the end, I've given 3 out of 5. Once again, you've got the pronunciation guide to help out at the front of the book. I quite like the cover. It's quite a dark one, but that follows the theme of the book overall, with the stormy waters portrayed in the artwork there. And there's also a couple of maps in here as well, so you've got a world map and then you've got a city map as well. So I think that all ties together quite nicely to give you a well-rounded book. So overall that gives a score of 85% for Sea of Souls by NC Scrimgeour. A really good score, definitely a surprise for me, but a welcome surprise. I think it's really deserving of such a high score because I really did enjoy it, and I definitely recommend picking it up and checking it out for yourself if it's something that interests you. In terms of my Hall of Fame, I've got a few titles on 85% as well, and that puts Sea of Souls in equal 23rd place. So again, that's a really nice place to be in the table. It's really high up and in some really good company. So there we go, that's my quickish review of Sea of Souls by NC Scrimgeour. Just came out at the end of August, and as I say, I definitely recommend checking this one out, seeing if it takes your fancy, and if it does, hopefully you'll have a good time with it as well. Let me know in the comments down below as usual if you've read this one, what did you like or not like so much maybe about this book, or if you're interested in picking it up, what are you looking forward to? I'll hopefully catch you in the next video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.